Hey there, this is Ben from patternprofits.net. I'm going to do a quick weekend summary as we head into the first week of March. We're looking at the QQQ. You can see that anchored VWAP off the high has acted as resistance. This is the daily chart. We did find volume shelf, point of control here, support. What I'm curious is if we'll have a bounce that maybe gives us a right shoulder to form some symmetry with the left side. I shared some sentiment indicators late last week that showed we're getting a little bit more as far as fear into the market with a higher put call ratio, but we're not quite there yet. So thinking in terms of how could we get there, a bounce here and then roll back over does kind of make sense. I have the 5-period RSI on this chart. We are very oversold. So typically this is an area where we do see a bounce. Also, if you were to throw on the fibs from here, you'll see that we're right at found support at 310.98. That's a 38.2 retracement. So it does kind of make sense that we would see a bounce here. Common, that we do. If you go over to the weekly chart, and this is why I worry about after the bounce, with these intermediate type declines, we usually get oversold on the weekly, as you see here, before we bounce. We're not there. We're still, kind of in middle of, just below the middle of the range there on the RSI. So I do think if this turns out to be an intermediate decline, there's a good chance we may test this anchored VWAP off of the low back here and possibly get this oversold. If you can match that up with a put call ratio showing extreme fear above 1.2, that's usually a pretty good sign for another trending up move and into new highs. As far as individual stocks, I'll definitely be keeping an eye on Futu, as that was one of the leaders of the last, really strong rally that we saw. This is one that acted very well, very strong. Now you have just below the prior highs, 204, kind of flagging here, a little bit sloppy. Anchored VWAP off the gap is above and the descending trend line. If we bring the volume point of control over, you'll see that it's just below. So we can look and see if it reclaims. It'd be a good sign for the market, tech in general, and for the China stocks if it can, take out this declining trend line, get back above anchored VWAP, reclaim the volume shelf. Would be a good sign if that happens early next week. So we'll be watching Futu carefully. Another one is CPE. This one has had just an incredible run from the time it hit the focus list scan. Just a fantastic run off the bottom. I captured a good portion of this move, but I got out right in here and it ended up tagging that target that I had up high at 27.50. What does make sense here is if a handle should form, if oil energy pulls back a little bit, tech maybe gets back in a rebound, a bounce in tech, it would kind of make sense that maybe we get a handle formation here. So that one will be on the radar, maybe even comes down, test the 20 and this anchored VWAP. If you look, this was the breakout and gap off the low, nice volume there. We got a tag here, handoff method, another anchored VWAP off the low. We'll see if we get that one tested. So that one will be high on the radar into next week. DQ, another one I'll be watching. Another, this is a pinch setup. I shared this actually late last week. We've got anchored VWAP off of the high, anchored VWAP off of the breakout here, and big volume back here, acted as support here. See if it looked like it was going to take out that anchored VWAP off of the high late on Friday, but then it did come back in late with the rest of the market and close below. We'll see if that can get out of the pinch and turn that anchored VWAP off the high back north. I want to talk briefly about Fiat. you know, there just wasn't much here. We talked about maybe if they'd held with the 80 MA, it did not. This is why you don't buy them up here. This is exactly why you don't chase them up, because they do this and you're underwater. And you went in without a plan and not knowing where to get out. The 80 MA didn't hold. Even if you tried to grab it here, it failed the next day and the 80 MA rolled back over. Now you maybe look for the 10. You know, the 10 has failed, so now maybe you look for the 20 to hold as support. Below that is the 50. But there was never a trade to be had here. Worth keeping an eye on, but not something that you want to be involved in. Here's one that power earnings gap this week, big volume, great numbers, held anchored VWAP after the earnings release. Good chance that this one kind of bounces around sideways here a little bit. You had an inside day on Friday, but this one is high on the radar to watch. I'd like to see it consolidate a little bit more, flag out a little bit more, maybe even come below, just below anchored VWAP, and then make a turn. This is a little earlier than I like to get involved, but I want to put it on your radar because it is one that I think is worth keeping an eye on going forward. Great numbers on that one, by the way. iRobot, another pinch that I'm watching. Get that off of there. Anchored VWAP off of the high, anchored VWAP off of the low. We're in the pinch, bouncing around, close back above the volume shelf. Anchored VWAP off the high, we'd like to see it come through there, turn that back up. But this is potentially actionable on strength, or if it does come back down, again in this area on the anchored VWAP, maybe the 50-day, if the market does get weak, will give another opportunity for a bounce, but another one worth keeping an eye on. Lovesac, this one has held up really, really well, even when the market was really getting hit. It pulled back a little bit late in the week, but it's held up really well, sitting just above the volume shelf point of control, still above the 10 and 20 EMAs. In fact, if you use the handoff method, here's the big volume gap back here. Anchored VWAP goes here. You can see how this held as support. Then you have another one here. Then you add in one more here. And that's kind of right where we're at, serving as support. Volume shelf point of control just below. You have 10 and 20-day moving average just below 2. So on strength, that one's really easy to manage into next week. HubSpot, this is another power earnings gap worth keeping an eye on. You had really good volume on that, and it was a monster gap. And now we're right up against anchored VWAP. It's acted as resistance. You have a volume shelf just below. We're looking for that one to make the turn, get back above anchored VWAP. The aggressive trade is when it comes through there. The safe trade is to have it come through, turn the anchored VWAP back up, grab it on the retest of the anchored VWAP, and then the bounce. So Hub's another one, HubSpot another one I'll be keeping an eye on next week. Yalla. A lot of people asking me about this one, so I wanted to include it. Back below pivot, 23.18 was the pivot. Nice run. If you took some profits on the way up, still could be in good shape holding a runner on this. From anchored VWAP from the breakout back here, the big volume breakout held last week. If that does fail, you're probably going down to this next one down here, which is from the IPO. And you have the volume shelf down there too, so it does make sense that maybe it does test that level. However, if this holds and it reclaims 23.18 pivot, you know, this kind of reminds me of the move that Futu made. Let's go back to Futu for a second. Before it had the big run, this back here had the breakout, big run, terrified everybody, came back, tested anchored VWAP, and then did this move. So we're going to need the market to cooperate for Yalla to do that same type of thing. But that's what this early stage of this reminds me of, where it has the big run, comes in heavily because of the market itself, not necessarily. Some people keep saying, what's wrong with Yalla? What's wrong with nothing? The market's coming in. That's what stocks like this do when the major averages are down 2-3% every day. That's what they do. They come in heavy. One more. JD. Same type of thing here, where this one has come in, but this one actually held the pivot 92.77. You also have the 50 MA cloud right there where it's at pivot. I think this over, it's a little bit lower as far as the volume shelf point of control, but if this is going to bounce, this is as good a spot as any, this 92.77 pivot on JD. That's all I've got. I did a TrendSpider seminar webinar earlier. I had some more ideas in there, Huya, Sell H, a few other ones that we covered. If you hadn't seen that, I linked to it on FinTwit. Check that out. There's some more ideas that I shared with Jake from TrendSpider there. Hope you guys have a great trading week, and I'll see you on FinTwit.